Hey everybody, and welcome to Q&A Wednesday, where I answer the questions that are super important to your health and fitness goals. So today we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not you are actually causing your own diseases. Now, let me take a step back. I'm not saying, that, hey, you are the root of all your problems. For the most part. Now, really to kind of give you a little bit more of a context, we're mostly talking about metabolic diseases. I'm not talking about COVID. I mean, that's a virus. We're talking about, metabolic diseases, the things that we know that make up a good portion of our health issues in actually not just our country, but around the world. So metabolic disease, if you've ever heard of metabolic syndrome, we're talking about things like cancer, diabetes, heart disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So all of those issues that we have that come from pretty much lifestyle choices. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Now, notice I'm outside again. The smoke finally cleared. It's kind of cloudy out today, a little hazy, but I'm just happy to be outside without all the smoke. So I was like, might as well do this while it's still nice out and it's not quite cold here yet. We up here in the Pacific Northwest, at least where I am, we tend to get an Indian summer, so it's still even warm outside. So I'm not complaining whatsoever. I really thought about this for a couple of reasons. A lot of times I struggle with some of my clients' issues where we can't figure out why they're not getting where they want to go, because they're doing all the right things. They're eating right, but we're missing a variable or two. We can't figure out quite what's happening. So today I posted on Instagram a little bit longer post about how what we do in our teens, 20s, and 30s actually directly affects our lives in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so sometimes we have to kind of go backwards and look at, well, what was my lifestyle in those years and how is it affecting me now? As a matter of fact, we don't even think about the fact that how we were birthed, were we a C-section, were we a normal birth, can actually affect your microbiome, which affects your health and your lifestyle as you get older, and whether or not you are able to live a healthy lifestyle and avoid diseases. So again, a lot of it's a little more complicated, but I'm gonna try and break it down to very, very simple. And of course, I'm not accusing anybody. It's one of those things that I'm frustrated that I know we're kind of waiting for, say, the food industry to get a clue and clean it up, and that's just not going to happen. So it really is up to us to we have to be our own best advocate, and we've got to take control of the situation and make sure that we're doing what we can to avoid it. And of course, if we're already in a position where we're dealing with some things like type 2 diabetes, that we do what it takes to heal ourselves. So let's talk about that. So I covered most of what kind of diseases we're looking at, predominantly the metabolic disease, but if you realize that it really affects a good portion of the population these days, and it used to be things like type 2 diabetes, they called it adult onset diabetes because it usually happened in the later years. Unfortunately, it's become something that affects people younger and younger because now this lifestyle or this convenient way of living has really gotten to us, and it's affecting even infants, if you think about that. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about this really quick. So let's talk about what causes those diseases. A lot of people say, well, it's just in my DNA, it's hereditary. So I personally know that type 2 diabetes definitely runs in my family. My mother and my grandmother both had type 2 diabetes. So it is something that I have to pay attention to. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be affected by that and that you absolutely will be somehow affected by that. But it's more of a situation where you might be genetically predisposed to deal with those diseases, but if you don't turn that light switch on, you won't have that problem. So, again, type 2 diabetes is the easiest one to describe because most of us know that it is a nutritional choice issue. So if you look at the fact that you might be predisposed to have type 2 diabetes because of your genes and your DNA, but if you do what it takes to not overwhelm your cells with glucose and cause insulin resistance, you may not ever have to deal with that problem. So keep in mind, while it is an issue, and if it does run in your family, absolutely it's something that you should pay attention to, but it's not equal to you will have that. Environment does also play a huge role. It's interesting to look at some of these areas which have been plagued by, take a look at other countries that don't quite have the same safety standards when it comes to our environment. and to our air, the air quality, and look to see what that causes in the people. So some of those things are just coming to light at this point. We talk about xenoestrogens, which are things that come to us from some of the, like say the plastics, leaches from the plastics that we eat out of, or some of the things in our air and in our environment, or even toxic mold, of course, is a huge issue that a lot of people deal with. Those things can cause some of those diseases, or really kind of exacerbate the fact that you might be predisposed to it. So again, that can be part of it, and some of that's going to take some educating yourself, because I just don't feel, first of all, we're not really educated in school about a lot of these things. I feel like our educational system really does not prepare us for life. It just prepares you if you want to go to college, and anymore, that's questionable whether that's a great option anyway. So again, you have to pay attention to your environment, and are you doing the best things for the world around you in order to keep those issues at bay. And then of course, nutrition. And of course, I know you're shaking your head going, I'm so tired of you talking about this, Melissa. But one of the things that I've discovered is, you really have to hear it multiple times before you really allow it to sink in. And for some people, it even comes down to having to have an issue before they even start to take it seriously. That's frustrating. So, obviously the earlier on that you can pay attention to this and take some precautions, the less likely you are to have to deal with some of these issues. So again, if any of those things tend to run in your family, if somebody in your family history has had dementia, or any of those issues that we are now discovering really stem from nutrition and environment, that is something to pay attention to. Now, really quickly, I also want to talk about really our toxic food options that are available to us these days. One of the things that I hate most is when they talk about grass. Now, I mean, generally recognized as safe. So, if you go back through the years, there's some different options, say, aspartame, that they have said, well, we generally recognize this as safe because in our studies, we don't think that you're going to eat enough to cause that issue. What if I do? Or what if I'm predisposed to have issues anyway? So you're telling me that aspartame isn't going to affect me at some point. I really have a hard time that they're allowing us to eat those things or put those things into our body without not necessarily doing enough research, but why shouldn't we say that it's probably not a good idea until we test it long enough to see that, yes, it is safe? So keep in mind that a lot of things that they put in our food these days might be generally recognized as safe, but to be honest, it doesn't mean enough. So again, you have to really kind of decide what's important to you. So that's a big problem. So, let's talk about prevention, which obviously is our best option. And some of us are old enough that might not be totally preventable. I'm in my 40s. So what I did my first 3 decades will affect me now. Fortunately, I figured it out early enough. I've kind of taken care of some things, but not everybody has. But obviously your best way to go around it is prevention. So, I kind of liken it to if you've ever had a bathroom where maybe the grout between the tiles was not sealed well enough, and so water over the years has gotten back behind the tile, back behind the tub, and then all of a sudden one day you start to realize that everything's deteriorating around that, and that maybe there's toxic mold. Well, now it's at a point where it's affecting everybody. It's kind of the same thing when we're teenagers and when we're in our 20s and we think, well, I don't gain weight easily, so I can eat whatever the heck I want. Don't you just get frustrated with those people? They eat whatever they want and they're still skinny. How is that even possible? That doesn't mean it's not going to affect them. It might not be showing it on the outside now, but a couple decades down the way, all of a sudden they start to have, their body shows the problems in other ways. Allergic reactions to things that they didn't normally have reactions to, psoriasis or some sort of skin issue that suddenly appears out of nowhere and they can't figure out why. Again, the type 2 diabetes, inflammation, cancer, those things can actually come from decades of making not really great choices that eventually show up within the body. So it's built up over time, kind of like that toxic mold. Excuse me, I had to do a little belch there. So again, it's unfortunate that not only have we not been taught that, but even the upcoming generation they've grown up on processed food, and that is a huge problem. If you read the ingredients on some of those labels, not just the label, you can't just read the nutrition label, that doesn't give you enough information. You have to read what's actually in that product, and then even do some research about what that product is. Caramel number 45, like what is that? That is an additive preservative coloring that is probably going to get stored in your fat cells and cause some destruction at some point in the future. So again, they don't teach this. So that's a huge problem. So part of it is making sure that you get a good education about it. I've spent the last decade becoming a huge biology nerd. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a nerd. I find it fascinating. I'm also frustrated because, again, they don't do enough. They don't do their due diligence in telling us, well, yeah, you can eat this now, but that Hostess Twinkie that could actually withstand an apocalypse is not really good for you. Not even just the fact that it's full of sugar. Well, sugar is a preservative, but it can be a problem over time. So it really comes down to making better choices, but you have to educate yourself in order to make better choices. And that really is the same for anything. That's the same for, investments. That's the same for, anything in your life that you're trying to make progress towards. You have to educate yourself to make sure you're making good choices on that. By the way, other things that might be included in what I'm talking about disease-wise, autoimmune diseases. I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and while that is something that's in my DNA, probably, the first 3 decades of dealing with probably eating way too much sugar. I remember a time when I used to think, okay, remember when you thought fat caused fat? Because there was this whole craze about low fat because fat causes fat, which we now know that's not true, right? So again, that can be a problem. Now, if you are already older and maybe dealing with some of these issues, I would say the first thing that you need to do is, as soon as possible, quit putting yourself in that position. Stop eating the junk and the processed food. Get out of whatever the environment that can be toxic to you. You have to now make those changes right now, because if you don't, it's just going to get worse. You can't reverse anything if you're still putting those things in your body. A few weeks ago, I talked about insulin resistance and how that happens. It's like having a suitcase and it's already so full of clothes, but you're still trying to shove more clothes in there. Well, that's insulin resistance. The insulin, your body's producing the insulin, but it can't stick any more glucose into the cell because it's full. Same issue. If you can't fix something if you're continuing to still do the thing that's causing the problem. So that can be, that's number one, right? And you really do have to do your own research. I really get frustrated when, I took a class at our local community college last summer, a nutrition class, and I was angry at the end of the course because they are still teaching antiquated information that they have now proven otherwise, such as saturated fat is bad for you. Red meat is bad for you. Red meat's not necessarily bad for you. It's what the meat eats that's now bad for you, right? So again, the research that they did might have been a burger on a bun. Was it the burger that was the problem, or was it the bun? Something to think about. So again, you really have to know what you're talking about. And I know that most people on average don't have the time for that. That is why I do these videos, because if you knew right from the get-go what the problem was, you might be able to make better choices. I know that for me, it was an education issue. I just didn't understand how the body worked, and that, sugar and vegetable oils cause a huge portion of the problems that we have metabolically. So figure out what caused it, and then make sure that you understand the best treatment to take care of that. And of course, that obviously should be done alongside your doctor. I mean, that's obviously super important. You don't want to just do it on your own, but it's okay to walk into a doctor's office saying, look, I've done some research and it shows that sugar actually feeds cancer. Is that true? So again, you need to make sure that you're running that by your doctor so that they understand and they can help you with the best treatment as well. So that is super important. So I know it's a short answer to a really complicated question, but I think the biggest thing is that it's not easy. We all know that, 3-4 decades worth of unhealthy choices that we might not have even understood were unhealthy choices, such as, if you're a type 2 diabetic and you're eating a whole lot of fruit, that is a problem, right? Fruit, we're told fruit's healthy. It's still sugar. So again, make sure that you know what you're talking about. But making those changes are simple, and it does come down to choice. Now, if you're waiting for the food industry to change everything for you, so that they know better, they should help us make healthy choices. No, it's not going to happen. Or if you think the government's going to give us better options, because if you look at myplate.gov, it still shows almost 60% of your calories coming in from carbohydrates, which is so frustrating. If you're trying to lose lose weight or get leaner and healthier, and you're eating 50 to 60% of your nutrition and carbohydrates, that is a problem. Remember that if your body prefers to burn carbohydrates, and if you are providing that energy through carbohydrates, why would your body tap into fat stores as fuel? It won't, right? So keep in mind that no, the government's not going to do that for you, right? Because they have a vested interest in not. The food industry definitely isn't going to do it because it won't sell product. And you can't wait for this pharmaceutical industry to come up with a magic pill, because it is not going to happen. They've already tried. You remember fen-phen? Some of those things they've come up with in the past had extreme side effects and did more damage than they did help. So again, you can't wait for any of these companies or these, whatever you want to call them, industries, to come up with the right answer. They're not going to. This is about you. Don't be the victim. You have to take control of that. You have to be your own best advocate, and you have to do the research. So that is a super important part of it. So no matter what's going on in your life, I really just implore you to take a deep dive into what are your habits right now. I get it. Like I said, I don't mind a glass of wine once in a while, or we'll bake a cake for somebody's birthday. We don't do it very often because, number one, I know how my body feels when I'm done with it. Number two, of course, I know that I could very well have type 2 diabetes if I'm not careful. And number three, I just know better at this point because I really have done the research. So again, I know it's not the answer that you want to hear. I know we want fast. We don't want to have to do the work to do it, but that's just not how it works. I really want you to be happy and healthy, and you have to know how that works for you. So hopefully, I know you don't want to hear it, right? It's hard to be in charge of that and to make sure that we are, I can't even think of the word, making the choices based on what we know. It's hard. It's accountability. That's the word. It's hard to be accountable for what we're doing, and making sure that, I've known people that are dealing with some intense issues, diabetes and things like that, and they just absolutely cannot make themselves make that choice, even though death has actually been knocking on their door. I've seen it. So that is a scary proposition. So make better choices. You guys ask all the questions that you want. I get my very best ideas from you, and that's why I do some of this deep dive, because I find it interesting. So I love that. I love a good challenge. But I want to make sure that you're getting the right information. My background is in education. I like to teach. That's my thing. So not just what, but also why, because it'll be a bigger reason for you to go out and do the right thing. So have an incredible weekend, you guys. That is Q&A Wednesday, and have a great night.